The sun was sinking low, stretching long, finger-like shadows across the packed dirt of the driveway. I stood there for a moment, just breathing, letting the familiar scent of the farm settle into my lungs. It was a suffocating mix: wet earth, rancid pigsties, and a sharp metallic tang. I had spent 10 years trying to drown this place out with the noise and smells of a city far away from here. I wanted to forget the squeal of the pigs, the heavy stench of the pens, and the way my heart would leap into my throat every time I heard a truck rumble up the driveway. The sound of a different vehicle, sleek and quiet, snapped me back to the present. "Hello, Elenore," Mr. Lewis said. He stepped out of his dark car, wearing a polite smile that never reached his eyes. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting long." Mr. Lewis had been a longtime friend of my mother's. He would come around from time to time when she needed an extra pair of hands. I watched him climb the porch steps. The old wood groaned under his weight. He pulled a key ring from his pocket, found the right one, and unlocked the door. I didn't have my key anymore. I had hurled it into the mud years ago, after I had screamed at my mother that I was never coming back. "It's just as she left it," he said, his voice dropping to a low, reverent hum. "Nobody's had the heart to go in since the funeral." The old wooden door resisted at first, before slowly giving way. The hinges groaned in protest as Mr. Lewis pushed, releasing a faint musty scent that lingered in the air. The air inside was stagnant. It tasted of mothballs and old grease, with that same copper prickle hitting the back of my throat. Mr. Lewis hovered in the doorway, his silhouette blocking out the late afternoon sun. "I'll leave you to it, then," he said, his voice sounding somber. "Your mother was a meticulous woman, Elenore. I'm sure you'll find everything exactly where it belongs." He didn't step inside. He just closed the door, and the click of the latch sounded final, like the house was sealing itself shut. I walked into the kitchen. It was spotless. Mother's obsession with cleanliness had always been her pride. But in this silence, gleaming white tiles felt clinical, like a surgery room. As I stepped further in, the soles of my shoes stuck slightly to the floor. It looked clean, but it felt sticky. Everything was a ghost of my childhood. The chipped porcelain sink, the floral curtains, the heavy oak table. I started opening drawers and cabinets, mindlessly looking through what may have changed. When I pulled open the junk drawer, I had expected rubber bands and dead batteries. Instead, it was packed tight with heavy-duty zip ties and rolls of silver duct tape. "Odd," I whispered to myself. Shaking my head as if dismissing the drawer from my thoughts, I moved to the refrigerator. It was the only new thing in the room. When I pulled it open, the light flickered over a wall of plastic containers, dozens of them, stacked with geometric precision. They weren't the mismatched Tupperware from my youth. They were brand new and identical. I shut the door, wondering why she had so much food packed in there. I turned to go down the narrow hallway, my hand trailing along the wood paneling. I could almost hear her voice echoing off the plaster, sharp and jagged like broken glass. "You think you're better than this, don't you?" she had hissed that final night. "You belong to this farm. You belong to me. Without me, you ain't worth spit." My throat tightened. I had called her a monster. I told her I'd rather rot in a gutter than stay there with her for one more second. I reached my old bedroom door. The wooden frame was chipped, and the brass knob felt like ice under my hand. I braced myself to see my old posters and my soft quilt. Pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, thick, pale, and reeking of unwashed skin and bleach. I felt a lump in my throat, and my stomach hit the floor. There was no bed. My old frame was missing, replaced by a single, stained mattress laying flat in the center of the floor. My posters were gone, and there were only faded peeling blue walls left. I looked at the window, and my blood ran cold. It had been blackened out, covered with heavy fencing that restricted any access to the glass. Not a single sliver of sun could make it through. Then I saw it. Near the corner of the mattress, a heavy iron ring was bolted directly into the floorboards. This wasn't my old bedroom. This was a cage. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My mind raced. Containers in the kitchen, the zip ties, the meticulous cleaning. "She kind of fell apart after you left," a voice came from behind me. I gasped, spinning around so fast I nearly tripped over the mattress. Mr. Lewis was leaning against the doorframe, tossing a roll of silver duct tape from the kitchen idly from one hand to another. "She missed you terribly, Elenore." His voice dripped with a sickening kind of pity. He stepped into the room, the tape hitting his palm with a soft thud. "You broke her heart." His voice was steady as if we were discussing the weather. "I came by to check on her every week or so after you'd left. She was just withering away, until one day I came by as usual, and she was glowing. She told me you'd come home. She told me you'd finally learned your lesson." He smiled, a thin, jagged line. "I was confused. I knew you wouldn't have come back. But then she brought out that girl to the table. She wasn't you. Not really. Her eyes were the wrong color, and she had too many freckles. But your mother, she was so happy." I backed away, until my calves hit the mattress. Who was she? I whispered, my voice trembling. Mystic girl. Someone from a few towns over. He shrugged. It didn't matter. I couldn't bear to snuff out that light in dear Adelaide's eyes. I couldn't let her be heartbroken all over again. He took another step, his shadow stretching across the faded walls. The first few didn't take. They were rebellious. They didn't know how to set the table right. They didn't know the songs your mother liked. So I helped her. We'd sit right here, and we would teach them. We'd practice how Elenore spoke, and we would practice how Elenore dressed. His gaze drifted to the floorboards. And when they failed, well, your mother was always a perfectionist. But the farm is a hungry place, Elenore. Pigs don't care if it's grain or a disappointment. Nothing goes to waste here. He looked back at me, his eyes shining with a misplaced, terrifying devotion. I spent years helping her build the perfect version of you. We went through so many Elenores to get it right. And now, the real thing just walks right back through the door, he said incredulously. He stopped at the edge of the mattress. I loved her, you see, and she's gone now, but you're right here. It wouldn't be right to let you leave after everything we did. He began to peel the first strip of silver tape. The screech of the adhesive seemed to scream in the quiet room. Welcome home, Elenore. For good this time. The sound of the tape was like a starting gun. My heart wasn't just hammering anymore. It was a panicked animal trying to claw its way out of my chest. Mr. Lewis took a measured step towards me, his heavy boots thudding on the floorboards. He was slow, confident. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I was just another disappointment to be fixed. Stay back, I croaked, my hands fumbling behind my back, searching the mattress, the floor, anything. Now, Elenore, he said, his voice dropping into a soothing, terrifying register. Don't make this difficult. Think of how much work went into this room. Think of all the effort. My fingers brushed against something cold and heavy near the iron ring. I didn't look. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. He lunged, surprisingly fast for a man of his age. His hand reached for my hair. I threw myself sideways, rolling off of the stained mattress. My hand closed around the object, a heavy master lock that had been left near the floor bolt. You are not my mother, I screamed, the words tearing at my throat. And you're sure as hell not my father. He let out a low, guttural growl and lunged again, his fingers catching the sleeve of my jacket. I felt the fabric rip as I swung the heavy lock with every ounce of terror-fueled strength that I had. It connected with a sickening crack against his cheekbone. He staggered back, a dazed look flickering in his eyes. as a dark bruise was already starting to form on his face. He dropped the roll of tape. It rolled across the floor and out of his reach. I didn't wait. I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the door. He was already recovering. He reached out and his hand caught my ankle. I went down hard, the wind leaving my lungs in a sharp wheeze. "You ungrateful girl," he hissed. He started to crawl up my body, pinning me down with his weight. I kicked blindly, my heel catching him in the chest, but he was like a wall of stone. His hands reached for my throat. My eyes darted around the room. The lock I used earlier was close by. I reached out, grabbed it from the floor, and slammed the metal as hard as I could into his throat. He choked. His grip loosened for a moment. I bucked my hips, throwing him off balance, and scrambled out of the door and towards the kitchen. My breath was coming in jagged stabs. I dove for the junk drawer. My hands tore through the zip ties until I found what I was looking for: the heavy kitchen shears. The heavy thud of Mr. Lewis's boots echoed in the hallway. "Elenore," he called out in a sing-song manner. It sent shivers through my whole body. I didn't stay to listen to any more. I ran for the back mudroom, the one place Mother had always kept oiled so the hinges would not squeak. I unlatched the bolt and burst out of the door into the cooling night air. The farm felt different now. The scent of metallic wasn't unidentified anymore. It was a warning. I could hear the low grunts from the pig pens behind the barn. I sprinted for the tall grass behind the house. The shears gripped so tight in my hand, they cut into my palm. I vanished into the darkness, just as the back door slammed open behind me. The grass whipped against my thighs, cold and sharp. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The sound of the pigs, that rhythmic wet grunting sound, seemed to follow me, a chorus of them all rising from the pens. I reached the edge of the tall grass where the old tractor path met the woods. My lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. I dropped into a crouch, pressing my back against the rough bark of an ancient tree, clutching the shears tight to my chest. A flashlight beam sliced through the darkness behind me, sweeping across the grass like a searchlight. "You can't go far, Elenore," Mr. Lewis shouted. His voice was distorted, whistling through what I had hoped was a broken jaw. "You don't know the property like I do. I've spent years walking every inch of this dirt while you were in the city getting soft." He was right. The farm had changed. Fences had been moved, paths had grown over. But I knew one thing he didn't. I knew where the ground gave way. I forced myself to move, staying low, heading towards the old silt pond, a treacherous path of boggy ground hidden by a layer of peat and high weeds. As a child, Mother had warned me to stay away from it. I heard his boots coming closer. He was heavy, his stride breaking through the brush with arrogant force. I reached the edge of the silt, my shoe sinking about an inch into the muck. I stepped carefully onto the submerged log. I remembered it was there from a lifetime ago. Then I threw a heavy rock into the center of the bog. It made a loud splash. "I see you," Mr. Lewis bellowed. A flashlight beam swung towards the sound of the splash. I saw his silhouette emerge from the grass, a dark hulking shape fueled by a decade of madness. He didn't hesitate. He saw me standing there by the pond and lunged forward, thinking he had me again. He didn't scream at first. There was just a sickening slurp as the earth swallowed his legs. "Elenore!" he screeched. He thrashed, which was his second mistake. The silt pond didn't just hold you, it sucked you in. The more he fought, the deeper he sank. By the time he realized what was happening, the muck was up to his waist. He dropped the flashlight. It landed on a solid clump of moss, its beam shining upward, somewhat illuminating his panicked face. I carefully stepped off the log, the shears still in my hand. I stood at the very edge of the solid ground, looking down at the man that had helped turn this place into a slaughterhouse. "Help me," he wheezed, his hands clawing at the surface, dragging in handfuls of useless weeds. "I loved her. I did it for her." I didn't respond, and I didn't stick around. He would need some help getting out of there. I turned and walked back towards the driveway. I didn't run this time. I reached my car and pulled the lighter from the console. I walked back to the porch, stood on the steps that had groaned under so many Elenores, and struck a flame. I tossed it onto the pile of dry wood stacked near the door. Sat in my car at the end of the driveway and watched. Fire took hold quickly. The old wood was bone dry and eager to burn. The orange glow lit up the night, reflecting off of the windows of the cage until the glass finally shattered. As the roof began to buckle, I put the car in gear. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just drove, leaving the scent of the smoke and the pigs behind me. Finally, drowning out the farm with the beautiful, chaotic noise of the road